Shabbat shalom, friends. A little bit of Torah this week in honor of my Rav, Rabbi Steve Sager, Zichrono Livracha, blessed memory, on the occasion of his fourth yahrzeit. Parshat Behar has this remarkable little thing about this Shabbat for the land, right? Some of you are nodding along. You have some passing familiarity with this concept of Shabbat, if the land gets a Shabbat of its own. Does anybody remember what this is called? Shemitah, thank you. Every 7 years. And then, after 7 cycles of 7, we get this really big Shemitah called the Jubilee, Yovel, thank you. That's the one. Yovel is great. It's great. It represents and looks and appears and unfolds like this total societal reset, trying to remake equality in society, that debts are remitted, that servitude, slavery, these things, so many things get reset and turned over, and ownership of the land and all of this stuff. It's this big cosmic leveler that's supposed to make society a little more just, a little more equal. And there's no historical evidence or record that that ever happened. There's not any real evidence, suggestion, archaeological record that the Israelites ever actually did the Yovel with any perfection. It's an interesting one. There are even versions of it that are sort of executed in modern Israel today, with various halachic innovations and workarounds and such. It doesn't actually function in that great cosmic socioeconomic leveler sort of way that it was in the Torah. But it's not clear that it actually happened. And this, to me, feels like a very, very important detail for how it is that we relate to Torah. You ever think about like some previous era or generation? They really had it made. That was the time to, be alive. They really had it figured out. That was really cool, I think about that sometimes with this sort of nostalgia that is false that I want to own. It's not real nostalgia because I didn't live through it. I didn't see it or whatever. A false nostalgia in the sense of the time that my grandparents lived, the greatest generation and all of that stuff, and how great their, surroundings and whatever were. I don't know that it was actually that great. My grandfather had to fight in a pretty horrendous war, World War II. But at the same time, I had this sort of false nostalgia for that as being this wonderful time. I have a comparable sort of false nostalgia sometimes that I think about in the 1970s, particularly with the music. I think about when my dad was around and that, he'd have gotten to see Chicago with Terry Kath and the Beach Boys and Sly and the Family Stone at their greatest. These were the years of Dwayne Allman. And I miss that too. They had it made. Boy, that was a great time back then. The 70s were awesome. Late 60s too, super cool, and I miss that also.
They weren't so great.
They weren't so great. I heard someone whispering over there. Leave it to somebody who lived through them to set the record straight. But here's the thing. As goofy as my false nostalgia is for these eras that I did not live through, we as a Jewish people will oftentimes make the same mistake around the Torah. We will oftentimes imagine these times and these eras and these places of Torah. Wow, that was the time when the kings of the ancient Israelites stood and the great temples stood in Jerusalem and the priesthood managed all of the stuff. Those were the days. Those were the days. And somehow what we're doing today is just some kind of pale imitation, cosplaying little pieces of it and bits and elements as we go through our prayer service that has imitations of what was the real temple service. Boy, if we could only have the temple service back with all of its sacrifices and stuff and whatever, that would be an amazing and wonderful thing. Slicha?
It's much cleaner today.
It's much cleaner today. Amara Osnat points out that you wouldn't have all the blood spraying in all the directions. detergent as it functioned in the ancient sacrificial service. But cleanliness notwithstanding, sometimes we talk ourselves into this nostalgia around Judaism and around sacred text. You know, back when the temple stood, those were the days. Or even, we'll go more recently than that. When Surah and Pumbedita stood, the great academies of the Talmud. In modern day, what's today? Iraq. When those great Talmudic academies stood, those centers of learning and erudition and wisdom and brilliance that gave us the legacy of the 63 volumes of the Talmud, those were the days when Rabbanim were Rabbanim, right? Again, it's a funny kind of trap that we can lead ourselves into, thinking that they had it made. Those were the days. If we could only do it like they used to do it. At the time of Rambam, Maimonides, this polymath among Jewish visionaries and geniuses. If we could have only lived in the era of Rambam and seen his philosophical brilliance at work, that would have been the era to live through. If only we had been able to be in that would have been it, right? But what I like about the Yovel here is that it gives room to say that maybe there is actually a Jewish flowering and flourishing that we haven't seen and that we're not trying to emulate or recreate or cosplay. The idea that the best and most holy times, greatest consciousness and moment of being close and in service to the Blessed Holy One, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's not actually something that our ancestors got to do that we don't get, that we're just doing a pale imitation of. What if that actually is something that maybe never did exist, and it's for us to lay the groundwork and the foundations and plant the seeds of what could be that Jewish flowering? It's a revision, an inversion of what it means to look at Jewish text and historical consciousness. To say that no, actually the best of our times were not Tmol Shil Shom, as the Bible says, the days of yore, but this idea that actually we could live into the holiest and greatest moment of Jewish flourishing. It's bold. It's pretty bold. But I think it's important. And I think that's a piece of why I like that the Yovel was not a historical fact, that we have some piece of Torah that actually the people in the Torah and the writers of it, it's not clear ever lived themselves. We have parts of the Talmud that talk about the sacrificial system and service of the great temples that stood, that again, scholarship indicates to us probably wasn't exactly what happened. But it's this amazing kind of, it's not quite nostalgia, and it's not false nostalgia, in that they're not putting themselves in it and, doing a violence to what was. But it's a way of remembering the future. Remembering and weaving into your memory the possibility and potentiality of what could be. It's to position yourself with text in a slightly different way. I was thinking about this. Anybody here listen to Wynton Marsalis? Know who that is, at least?
Yes.
Jazz player, yeah. Marsalis brothers, famous sort of jazz dynasty family. He's a great horn player, don't get me wrong. He's one of the best in the world today. And yet what's interesting in his functioning and leadership around the Lincoln Center is the way that he imagines and enshrines jazz as a music. He preserves it. He keeps it pristine. It happens in the Lincoln Center, in a place where people put on their black tie formality dress, and they go and they sit down, and then they politely applaud when they're supposed to. I'll contrast the Wynton Marsalis vision of it with a band I saw not long ago called Soul Live. 3 guys with think they're Berkeley School of Music trained musicians, real professional jazz players. But their whole raison d'etre is that jazz ought to be fun. It ought to be dance music. It ought to be cool. It shouldn't be something that gets preserved behind a window where you have to put on your finest outfit and dress up just right. It's actually, I think, in this room, the difference between the Torah that we take out week in and week out and we read the stories of, and the Torah behind glass over there that doesn't move, that represents a certain kind of memory, a certain kind of perseverance vis-a-vis the Shoah, that it was redeemed and rescued and saved, but it doesn't move. We don't go in there and turn it to this week's parsha every week. It's been wherever it is for some years now. And it's beautiful as a symbol, and it's important as a symbol. I'm grateful that we have it, but it does not make a substitution for the Torah that we had out and we were reading in the room, the living, breathing one, the one that imagines there is some kind of future in what it is that we are doing, the one that is not an article of preservation, but is an item of imagination. And this is where I think a lot about the Torah of Steve Sager, actually, blessed memory. Guy had a PhD in Midrash, rabbinic stories. And so his consciousness around Talmud and Agadah and Midrash and these stories very much made me the Jew that I am today. And his consciousness around it was very much informed by this ein mukdam u'me'ochar quality. There's no such thing as early or late in Torah. It's atemporal. It's why you have these rabbis who historically we believe lived at different eras and would not have lived at the same time, yet they have arguments in the Talmud because the time part of it doesn't really matter. What matters is the ideas and what's sacred, what's holy. And so it's this idea of if you are a serious student of Talmud, you don't read it behind glass. You don't prop it up as a display or a symbol of something. You pull up a seat at the table with all of those rabbis from 1500 to 2000 years ago, and you join the conversation. If you read it as an article of preservation, that's cool. You could be a Talmud major or something. You could read it in its perfect, historical artifact. But if you want to be part of it as an enterprise and what it does, you can't read it like that. You have to read yourself into it. Sometimes I am challenged to do that with Torah. Sometimes I have an easier time doing that with Talmud because I learned from Rabbi Sager. And Torah, well, we've already got all the brilliant ideas, and we've got this Mefarshim and these set of commentators and whatever else. They're going to tell us what it really is and whatever. How do you find a seat at the table when there are already so many? And that feels like the challenge of Yovel. That feels like the challenge of a system that never actually happened in its own historical place because we get to have a seat at the table in our own time. Ein mukdam u'me'ochar b'Torah. There's no such thing as early or late. You have to pull up a chair. You have to live your life in reference to it. You have to live your life with it, not as preservation, but as imagination. It's a way of being Jewish in the world. It was Steve's way of being Jewish in the world. It's why, even though he spent his career as the rabbi of a conservative synagogue, he was an early musmach from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. He had a way of twinning some of that mythic and epic imagination of what Judaism could be with the sort of tradition of having the traditional words and keeping within this kind of framework. It's a delicate dance. It's a hard needle to thread. But I think unless we do have a Torah, not of preservation, but a Torah of imagination, that's where it is that we live into. The Yovel is just a reminder of that knocking at the door. We haven't figured it all out yet. The best of our times as a Jewish people and civilization are not behind us. We are not cosplaying some pale imitation of what our ancestors used to do, whether that's in Jerusalem, whether that's in the shtetls, whether that's in Sura or Pumbedita, wherever. It's not what we're doing here. It's not why you're here. What we're doing here is not preservation. It's an act of bold and holy imagination. Shabbat Shalom.